Um, they start the chapter with three key facts. One of them, he talks about fluctuations are irregular. So, like if you look at the business cycle, the up and down, the business cycle occurs, but it occurs at different rates and it's unpredictable. So you don't know how long a recession is going to be, and you don't know when like a recession is going to come. And the same thing for a peak. The second fact is kind of like this bottom. Our GDP, income, and employment all move in the same direction. I think it's important because I think a lot of times they ask you to do things like they'll shift aggregate demand right, and output's up and price levels up, but you don't know. But sometimes you forget income and employment also increases. So that would be the second fact. And the third fact is there's an inverse relationship between output and unemployment. And that makes sense. When output is down, you need less workers, so unemployment is up. When output is up, you need more workers, so unemployment is down. Okay. He then talks about assumptions of classical economics. And just because we really haven't talked about money supply, just realize when money supply increases, aggregate demand shifts right. And, if you just think of more people have money, they're going to consume more, aggregate demand's going to shift right. And if money supply decreases, aggregate demand is going to shift left. All right. So an increase in money supply, aggregate demand right, a decrease in money supply, aggregate demand left. And then in the long run, there's going to be no change in our GDP. And why they say in the long run, because say you increase the money supply, you get aggregate demand to shift to the right, and you move from A here to B. Well, in the long run, at B, you're making more output. Therefore, you need more workers. The demand for workers increases. So when you renegotiate for wages go up. Wages go up, companies earn less money, so they're going to supply less. So you're going to get in the long run to see where output can change. Okay, only price level changed. All right, and then he talks about aggregate demand. When he talks about the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, he's really not including the LRAS, like when he's just talking about that model, and therefore, he would talk that the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model is used by economists for short run fluctuations. All right, AD right or AD left. Then in the chapter, they talk about why is aggregate demand downward sloping. All right, the first reason is the wealth effect, and that's about purchasing power. So the wealth effect is about purchasing power. And what that would mean is if price levels go up, the same $10 buys you less. And if price levels go down, the same $10 buys you more. So the wealth effect is about purchasing power. And then it's the interest effect. If price levels go up, people need more money. They're going to borrow money from the banks, which drives interest rates up. If interest rates are up, businesses are going to invest less, right? Because they're not going to want to borrow. So that's going to shift aggregate demand down. All right. So the interest rate effect is that if interest rates are high, businesses are going to invest less, aggregate demand is going to go down. And if interest rates are low, businesses are going to invest more and aggregate demand is going to go up. And then third is about price levels and net exports. If price levels are high, foreign countries are not going to want to buy our goods, so exports are going to go down, and we're going to buy goods from foreign countries, so imports will go up, so net exports are going to decrease. So the three reasons aggregate demand is downward sloping is the wealth effect, the interest effect, and then the trade effect. So those would be those three. Then he talks about shifters of aggregate demand. And the first one is consumption. And I like you to realize stock market has to do with consumption because that's going to increase or decrease wealth. All right. Optimism has to do with consumption and really investment. Okay. That's going to shift aggregate demand to the right. Pessimism is going to be consumption and investment. Uh, and then income is going to be consumption because you're going to have more or less money. So while I'm saying consumption, you could think stock boom or stock crash, optimism, pessimism, income on taxes. All of those would be in the consumption shifter. And it's also worth mentioning that recessions are really caused by decreases in consumption and business investment. Those are the two drivers of a recession. Okay. The second, so we got consumption as the first shifter. The second shifter is investment. All right. Right now, for investment, I would say optimism and pessimism is going to affect that because of businesses. You know, if people are expecting the economy to go well, businesses are going to invest more. So that then net exports, exports minus imports, and then government spending. And even though this isn't in this chapter, I'll remind you government spending is one of the two fiscal policies. Okay, so you got consumption, investment, net exports, government spending as the shifters of aggregate demand. Then you went on to why is aggregate supply vertical in the long run? And one of the reasons is as price levels go up, with all other things staying the same, companies make more money, therefore they're going to supply more. So all things being the same, and I'm talking about short run aggregate supply now. In the short run aggregate supply is going to be upward sloping. Now, why is the aggregate supply vertical in the long run? It's because output is the same without changes. So, right, like, and I'm sorry, I confused my short and long run there. So in the long run, you're going to get back to C, right? So output is going to be the same unless you have a shifter of the long run aggregate supply. So price level or money supply doesn't change output. So therefore, it's going to be the vertical. Okay. What might change or shift the curve? I would say it's the same. If you think production possibilities, change in quantity or quality of resources or technology, but I'll break it down into more. So I'll say change in quantity or quality of resources, capital stock, meaning do we have an inventory of machines, of building more factories, of equipment, natural resources, increase or decrease, and technology. So again, the LRAS is vertical. You would say it's vertical because unless one of those four change, output doesn't change because you get back to the long run. Now, this is what I was saying before. I looked and I flipped. Why is aggregate supply curve upward sloping? And that's because when price levels are up, companies make more money, so they supply more. Okay. Sticky wage theory, which would be at B, we're in the short run. And the reason is because resource prices and wages don't adjust, they stay the same. And that's basically because of contracts, all right, because resources and wages are contractual. Then you got the sticky price theory, which says people are also slow to adjust prices. And why is that? Because there's a cost for companies to change. And a lot of times those are referred to menu costs. And yes, if you change prices, you need new menus. You have to change your advertising. You have to retrain staff maybe about the impacts of the new prices. So there's cost to the change. So sometimes you're not going to change right away. You might wait a while because you don't want to be changing like every day because there's costs to changing your price. Those are a lot of times referred to as menu costs. And then there's the misconception theory or misperception theory. And that is when you think what's going on in your market is going on in the entire country. When you think what's going on in your market is going on in the entire country. So like I might be in the pizza industry and I'm selling less pizzas, and therefore I think it's a recession. Well, it might be some other foods, fast foods are opening, while other things might be impacting my industry. I think it's impacting the whole country. All right. Then he talks about the shifters of short-run aggregate supply, which is RAP. All right, that's resources. And for resources, I want to emphasize wages are a resource, oil is a resource, production costs are a resource. So wages, oil, production costs, or resources. Actions of government, different than different than government spending, because here you have business taxes, subsidies on business, and government regulations. Business taxes, subsidies on business, excuse me, and business regulations. And then he talks about pessimism and optimism, shifting aggregate demand, which, like we talked about for two reasons, that they both affect consumption and investment. And again, I want you to realize consumption and investment are the down decreasing of consumption and investment is what causes a recession. All right. And then he talks about two great aggregate demand shifters. And one is the Great Depression. And he talks about things that caused the Great Depression, which is a low money supply, stock market crash, banks going bad. So you had low money supply, then you had banks going bad, which caused less money in circulation. Then you had stock market crash, which hurts wealth. So you had a huge shift of AD left. And then the second great AD shifter is World War II. And you got to realize at that time, we didn't have like an army that's built up like we do today. So, you were building tanks and you were building planes and you were building machines and machine guns. All that had to be produced during World War II. So you could say huge government spending for World War II, shifting AD to the right. And then, again, effects of a shift of SRAS. If you have an increase in production costs, an increase in oil, an increase in wages, those three are going to shift SRAS to the left. Okay. And I'm going to just erase this here for a second. And if you just start out like fresh and you go SRAS left, like here, you have stagflation, right? And you have, because you have an increase in price levels, which is the inflation part. And then for the stag, you have a stagnant economy because output has decreased. And again, that's sometimes called cost push inflation. And the reason it's sometimes called cost push inflation is the cost of oil or the cost of wages or the cost of production costs pushes the price levels and the output to that part. So that is kind of a summary of the chapter. If anyone has any questions on the chapter or practice test, let's see, can I share the practice test here? You could just put in, let me put the chat up. You could put in the chat any questions you'd want me to answer. I'd be glad to answer anything. question 8. Okay. Let me scroll down there, Jose. And let's see. Okay. All right. So Jose, I'm going to try to graph this here, Jose. And I'm not going to label things because I've trouble just graphing it. Okay. So Jose, it's refer to pessimism. In the long run, the change in expectations create. All right. So the short run pessimism, right? We're going to shift aggregate demand to the left. Pessimism is going to, create doubt in people's mind. People think they might lose jobs. Consumers are going to spend less. Businesses are going to spend less. Aggregate demand is going to shift to the left. There is no, however, and they're asking about the long run. So I'm going from A to B. And B, making less product, therefore I need less workers. So if the demand for workers decreases, when it's time to negotiate wages, wages are going to decrease. If wages decrease, businesses make more money. So supply shifts right. C. That is short run aggregate supply. That's why C is the answer. Does that make sense to you, Jose? Okay. So it's really important in this to see are they asking short or long run, and are the answers in the short or long run? Any other questions anyone has on the practice quiz or anything in the chapter or anything in general? And by the way, the same optimism, pessimism, and stock market boom will be on your regular test. So when you see optimism, AD right. When you see pessimism, AD left. Anyone else? Okay, if no one has any questions, I did a breakdown of the practice quiz that's videotaped and on the topics page. I will be in 7:45 Tuesday to do a review, and I could answer any questions you have there. Otherwise, thanks. Enjoy your day off tomorrow and have a great rest of your night. Take care.